Insurance costs being impacted by this extreme weather, the warmth. In fact, we welcome in Dr. Blair Feltmate, head of the Intact Center on Climate Adaptation and also with the University of Waterloo. Blair, thanks for joining me. How are you?
Well, thanks very much for having me, and I'm great.
Are insurance costs for homes being impacted by this extreme weather? And if so, will things get worse?
The answer is yes and yes. And so over the last about 6 to 8 years in Canada, home insurance premiums have increased by about 20 to 25%. About 60% of that increase is due to flooding, floodwater in basements. And the insurance, the cap limit on insurance that insurers offer to cover flooding in basements, it's gone from maybe 8 or 10 years ago to normally being in the range of $40,000 to $50,000. It's come down more commonly into the zone of $20,000 to $30,000. This is a problem because the average cost of a flooded basement in Canada is about $43,000 when it occurs. So people can very much be on the hook for covering this cost out of pocket. And so basically, the extreme weather is certainly, conveying costs. And by the way, we now have about 1.5 million homes in Canada, or 10% of the residential housing market, where people can no longer get insurance coverage for their homes for floodwater in the basements, period, at any cost.
10% can't?
Correct. Yes, 10% of people, 1.5 million homes. They can still get insurance for theft and fire, but not for floodwater in the basement.
Wow. And so, we have this extreme weather. It's warmer. We're having this unbelievable, unseasonable winter here in Winnipeg. And we think, well, maybe we're not going to heat the house as much and we can save some money there. But in the long run, this isn't so good for insurance premiums.
Well, it's not good for insurance premiums for sure. And also even for the value of homes when you go to sell a home. We did a study about maybe a year and a half ago or something, whereby we looked at over the last 10 years in Canada, when you have catastrophic flooding in communities, the kind of stuff you see on the news at night, that sort of thing, where it's bad. We looked at within cities that had catastrophic flooding in areas where flooding was quite severe, but it might be a few blocks over where they didn't have flooding. We could do a comparison between looking at the sold price of homes for a period of 6 months after the flood occurred. And through an experimental design that allowed us to isolate for the effects of flooding on the sold price of homes, we found over the last 10 years in Canada, there was a reduction for at least up to 6 months after the flood occurred, an average reduction in the sold price of homes of 8.2% less. They sold for 8.2% less if you had a home in a flood-impacted community. Your home didn't have to be flooded. It just had to be in that community. So if you had a home that would normally sell for $500,000, it now sold for $460,000. And by the way, this is what's already happened. This isn't theory or modeling or anything like that. That's what's already occurred.
And that's why it could get worse, right? Because this is already happening now, and the direction it's going isn't going to get better.
Yeah, we're getting driven by climate change is the bottom line. Extreme weather is getting more extreme. Flooding is more problematic. In terms of insurance payouts across Canada, from 1983 up to 2008, the insurers could count on paying out about $250 to $450 million per year in insurance claims. From 2009 onwards, the average claims payouts have been just over $2 billion per year. And for 14 of the last 15 years, all the insurance claims payouts have been over $1 billion. And the culprit driving most of the upward bend in the curve is too much water in the wrong place, flooding, and that's followed by costs due to wildfires.
Well, and just in our city here in Winnipeg, I know you're not here, but I mean, we're built on rivers, right? And yeah. There have been people who come look at my home, adjusters and stuff, and said 78, 80% of the city is on top of water. So when we get more of it or it flows differently, like it really affects some of the basements here in our city. Other than flooding, what else is causing insurance premiums the most? I think of the wildfires in BC, and I think of how stories not this past time they had wildfires, but the previous time a couple of years ago when I heard people say, well, the insurance premiums are so high that after 10 years, it wouldn't even pay to insure the house, so I just don't.
Yeah. So what we have to do now for both, whether it's for wildfires or for flooding, and those are the two most expensive perils in Canada for extreme weather, period. The good news is, there is some good news in this. Over the last, starting about 8 or 9 years ago in Canada, we've developed very good standards to give direction to both homeowners and to communities. Actions that can be taken at the home level or at the community level to make it such that when the big storms hit, water gets sent to a safe location and people's basements don't flood. We can reduce the flood risk that's currently being realized more so than we're doing. And the same for wildfires. We actually know things you can do at the level of the house and at the level of the community, that when fire comes through a region, you can make it such that the homes don't all burn down, or businesses or whatever. And by the way, just to flip to, let's say, wildfire for a moment, just at the level of the house, it can be actions as simple as don't store your wood at the back door of the house. Around the perimeter of the house, remove shrubs and vegetation and other burnable materials for a distance of about 2 meters away from the wall of the house, such that if fire comes through and you have shrubs right up alongside of the wall of the house, the shrubs ignite and then the heat transfers to the house and the house burns down. So get that burnable material out of there. Or even the roofs of house, you want to have roofs on houses that are such that when embers land on that roof, the roof doesn't ignite. And about 70 to 90% of houses burn down during wildfires because embers land on roofs that burn. But you can have called Class A shingles or metal roofing on houses that make it such that when the embers land on it, the roof won't catch fire. So there's a lot of things you can do to mitigate flood risk and wildfire risk at the level of the home and the community. And the problem is this stuff is not being done or implemented quick enough in Canada.
Right. Well, that's fascinating. There was some good news there, but you're a good guy. Just the news, most of it wasn't too good, but we appreciate this, Blair. Great stuff. Where can people get more information on this? Is it the Intact Center?
Yeah, if you just type Intact Center on climate adaptation, and it's all free, by the way, our website comes up and people will see immediately what they can do to protect their home from flooding, what they can do to protect their home from wildfire. And by the way, most of this stuff can be implemented over a long weekend without special expertise, generally speaking, for less than a few $100s. There's a tremendous amount you can do to get the risk out of the system very easily.
Well, you got one person that's going to check it out and spend a weekend doing this for sure, especially in our city, Blair. So thanks for this. Really insightful and some great information there. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Dr. Blair Feltmate, head of the Intact Center on Climate Adaptation and the insurance premiums that extreme weather is costing us, and just how to protect your home. It's all good advice there.